she's joined. Will, are you 703-574-182?
I am. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine. It had two entries. It has your name and then it has the number, so I wasn't sure if that was both of you or all of you. Okay, so everybody who's on the line, I did turn on the recording. This is for our minutes purposes to be able to transcribe and make a summary for anybody who doesn't make it. So as we go through, a lot of these slides are very similar. My hope is we have Rachel on the line, and she's gone through and done her training presentation that we'll be able to tap into her experience. She can tell us how it went and any of the challenges she may have faced or anything that was helpful for anybody else when they go through this process. So we start off with the slides. If I can get my computer to respond. There we go. The agenda is essentially just to run through the peer coaching and see if there's anything that we can do to help you deliver the training and make sure that we have kind of a status, if you will, for everybody as they're moving forward. So if you look at the first bullet, purpose of the web conference, the requirements, and then trainer requirements, which has an MOU, those are the slides that we've had before. Conducting your tribal crisis response training is very similar until we get back down to the third slide, or third bullet there, which is to get feedback from Rachel and to share Marilee Fisher's interview. And then we move into the post-training items, the next step, which will all be very familiar. So I think, Rachel, you might be the only person we have on the line other than staff. So we have Ben and Kelly with NIJC, Will Marling, and Carol. And then I saw Rachel had joined us. Is there anybody else who's on the line that I missed? Okay. We'll move forward. We're going to have to start doing some incentives to get people to join on the calls. Okay, so the purpose of the web conference, as I said, I won't spend too much time on some of these slides. We'll get straight to your content, Rachel, if you're okay with that, and then that'll help us maybe give us a little time to ask you questions, too.
Sure. I don't mind.
Great. Okay, so we've got the MOU with your program already, and then the training for the Moodle course is online. Not much has changed, although we did change the server. So now when you go to the old server, it will point you to a different direction for some of the courses. But I do believe all these courses remain the same, so you should be able to get there just fine. Okay, so let's jump in. I'm going to go straight to, there we go. So, Rachel, can you tell us what the training was that you had done and the audience, maybe a little information about what happened?
Yeah, sure. So the first training I did was with a smaller group of people because I kind of wanted to test it out a little bit first to see what I needed to tweak. And it's a group that meets on a quarterly basis, and there was let me pull up my sign-in sheet, actually, which I have a sign-in sheet to send to Ben. All you guys on that. So it was comprised of people who worked on tribal land. It was some of their advocates that they have, and it was a few people that worked in TANF in the different locations. So it was a pretty good, well-versed group of people, but with them, what I kind of had to do, because I first started to talk to them about what the training was about, and there tended to be a lot more questions around that. So I ended up not being able to get through the entire thing because there were so many questions about, and they invited me to come back to finish it.
Okay.
So that's number one of my lessons learned is that I kind of made it too long. I thought we would cover more things than we actually were able to cover in the first session. So
Can I ask you, in terms of their questions
Mhm.
about that they posed to you, was it very specific to just the crisis response training, or was it more about your agency and how it was going to work with your agency?
No, it was actually more geared towards their own specific. I think there was a couple of things that made it a little more difficult. One was there was groups from several different tribes there, and so they had a lot of very specific questions that they wanted answered for how am I going to apply this to my tribe? And so there was a lot of that. And then there was we have a diverse group here. We have tribes that are in really like less populated areas, and then we have some that are kind of more urban. And so that kind of tended to bring a lot more questions around that too.
Did they interact with each other? I'm wondering if there were any cross-jurisdictional, tribal jurisdictional type of, I don't want to say territorialism, but were they willing to discuss the topics with one another?
They were, yes. They actually, and that's what they asked for more time for. They said they wanted to take some of the stuff and discuss it and then have me come back. And then they wanted to pose some questions for me before the training, before I come back to finish the rest. Because they wanted some time amongst themselves to kind of discuss how are we going to present this information and what are the questions we have that we want answered.
Okay, that's actually really good to get them talking about it. The training itself is designed to make people think about what they need to do to bring their crisis teams into fruition. And what we're finding are for those groups that already have a team in place, that they kind of look at maybe adjusting their team in terms of composition. But for those tribes that don't have a team at all, it seems like it's a real big kind of thing to tackle. So I kind of like the idea that they're willing to take this back and review it. So part of what we've done with the course is also to commit that Moodle course, the online course, so people would have time to absorb the materials in advance.
Okay.
That might be another way, so people don't have to necessarily pass the single training manual all the way around, or you could point them to a specific module that you would focus on in the classroom if it helps or is supportive.
Okay. You think to do that ahead of time?
If
for
the
them to do that
questions
ahead
come
of time,
back
or?
and they're real specific to something the Moodle course can support, then yeah.
But
I want you to share those questions with us, and we can point out which modules will work.
Okay.
So keep going. Sorry, I had my own questions, and now I'm starting to disrupt your discussion.
No worries. That's fine. I did talk to them about, I spent a little bit of time on empowering them, and I let them know that although I was the one delivering the information, it was more of a way to just empower them on how they wanted it to work for each different tribe. And although we were together, I just thought we could learn from each other, but that if we needed to have very different ones for each tribe, we could absolutely do that. And they did like that. They liked that they could make it their own if they needed to. And I did ask them, I said, I'd kind of like for someone in your groups to kind of step up as the leader, and so that I can come alongside and give whatever resources we can. So they liked all that stuff. One of the lessons learned, what I'm going to do next time is give them a little more background information beforehand, so that they can come with a little bit of background knowledge before the course gets started. Because I tended to focus a lot on that because it was a group that doesn't deal with this a lot of times, so they had a lot more questions about just what is crisis response, what are you guys currently doing? And I would probably spend a little less time talking about what our crisis response team is, because we do have one, and we're looking to create one specific to tribes. And I think that kind of confused it a little bit with them when I started talking about our crisis response team. I thought it was going to give them kind of background, but I think it made them feel like we were wanting to come in and impose our thing to them. So I might bring it up, but I might bring it up in a different way to the next group.
Yeah, I can see where even a mention of an agency putting together a tribal team, if they're only going to filter that in one of two ways. One is you're putting that team together to come and serve our community, or you're putting that team together and that means that, you know, we don't necessarily have to have a team in place, like you're doing it for them.
Yeah.
So if I were you, if you have to do that, it's kind of like when people have tribal liaisons in their agencies, they have to explain that it's still that person working for the agency and that their goals align with the agency goals and use agency resources. And the overarching goal is to make sure that there's a dialogue between the liaison and the tribe so that you understand what their needs and concerns are, and that they still need to have a team on their side of the fence to deal with their immediate needs, but at least that opens a channel in case something does happen, you know who to call and who you're talking to.
Yeah.
It's almost like a reflexive action among tribal communities is, you know, either that resource belongs to us or you're going to serve us, so you have to identify right away what it is.
Right. Right. So
that's really good feedback. It's not something that we've run into. I think with our pilot test, we were working with people who already had a background in this, so we didn't have to go through a lot of explanation that you were faced with.
Mhm. Yeah, and fortunately, I've gone through, and our group does have our own crisis response team, or our county does, so I was able to kind of pull a lot of that. But I would have liked to have a lot more of that with me, you know, to be able to share.
Okay. So have somebody maybe representing that team with you, or just more information about that team?
No, probably, yeah, I just probably would have liked, I don't know, I needed to just have it, I think it was just the order in which I did it. Like I should have talked about them first and then let them absorb and kind of think of what it would look like to them, and then talk to them about, if they didn't have an example, let them know about what we currently do as an example, where I kind of phrased it the other way. So I don't know if that, it tended to bring up a lot more questions about what our crisis response team is. And then it kind of blocked a little bit about what it would look like for them.
So that's a really good point, that we should be able to compare and contrast the existing teams that are out there.
Mhm.
I think the manual does a good job at describing that the tribal crisis response team, describing its role, but when you compare it and contrast it with the others, it might clarify it a little more.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason that would be helpful for others to know is because Cal OES, who's the main funder for a lot of victim services programs, at least in California, has given a lot of money for counties to create their own crisis response teams. So they might hear that a lot, especially in other counties. So just maybe doing something like that, because those teams would likely have to work in collaboration with each other, so to kind of know each other's roles.
Is that you rejoining?
Yeah, it's Will. What happened?
I don't know. I heard your beep go off, and when I looked at the list, you weren't on there with the phone number anymore.
Yeah, it just stopped. I don't know why. I thought maybe something happened. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, we didn't see it on this end if it happened. Okay, I'm still writing down a couple of notes here, Rachel. Okay, got it. So I'm going to try and look for a place to include more information about local teams, Cal EMA's role, which I think we have a referral and a link to in there, and then comparing and contrasting the tribal teams with the local teams.
Yeah, the other thing that kind of came across was, and this happened in our own crisis response team, is being able to explain the difference and why it's different from like a first responder. You know, why is this any different than like when the firemen come out, but first responders, being able to differentiate first responders versus secondary responders.
Okay.
That was easy. I mean, once I explained it, they got it, and I did talk to them, and what they did like and what I would suggest others do is when I talked about the long-term responses needed in some of these events. And that is where we differentiate between a first responder and a secondary responders, because we're in it for the long haul, and we're here long after the first responders have left.
So, Rachel, do you know about the Intertribal Long-Term Recovery Foundation?
I do not.
Okay. They work more in San Diego County as opposed to Riverside County. I was just curious to know if they've done any work in your region. So I've known the people that have been involved in that foundation for years and years, but only recently understood that there was an actual foundation. I knew they did that kind of work, but I didn't understand that it was formal. So it's a lot of people that were brought together for the fires that happened. I want to say it's 2014, the last big fires that were in and around Rincon and La Jolla.
Yeah, the Rincon,
And so they set up a foundation, and it's tribally administered, meaning that the people who are on the board and the staff are all from those communities. And just because you had mentioned the long-term recovery part of that, it may be that people will be familiar with that group because they have been like boots on the ground the day after a disaster first. So like when we had fires up here in Middletown, they were here the next day working with tribes to set up their, whether it was a communications outpost or to be able to receive donations, that kind of thing. So just going to throw that out there only because I really just learned about the formalities of what they do. And when we had the fires up here, they called us afterwards. So we're going to try and do kind of an extension of their program up here within our building and our infrastructure to do, just to address some of the long-term needs of tribal people here. And this will kind of feed into that explanation about the first versus secondary responders. One of the activities that we are doing, not because we thought it was a good idea, but because we were getting calls from people that had lost their regalia or they had lost their baskets in the fires, and because they were living in an urban area, they were going through FEMA and Cal OES and looking for help, but that kind of help wasn't there. So we started getting calls from people asking, if we knew of basket weavers who might be able to do their baskets or replace them for them, and started doing some workshops locally that really were more about trauma and mental health, like getting people together and doing just some introductory basket weaving, beading, that kind of thing. And this is just to give you kind of a secondary responder or long-term type of response in a tribal context. So that people would kind of get the idea that, okay, first you have the people who are going to come out and save lives, and then when they're clear, you've got the people who are going to start piecing back those, those pieces of our lives that are left, and then trying to address and replace the pieces that are gone. It was a dynamic that created itself when we started getting all the calls. We were like, wow, there's a lot more people out there than we realized that had been impacted in different ways. But sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking that might be a good thing for us to include in the manual as well.
No, that's good. I'm taking notes myself. So yeah, that would be helpful. And let's see, where was I? The video, the audio recording that Ben had gotten together. They really liked that.
Great.
Yeah, I was actually only intending for them to hear a certain portion of it, but they actually wanted to hear it in its entirety. But there was a lot that they used as, as examples. The leader in the group started saying, and you heard her say on the video, and this is why that's so important. So they used a lot of that as references in the videos, or in what they heard her say. So they reinforced a lot of that.
Did you show the video as well? I'm wondering how much overlap there was. Follow me video.
I did not, because there was something wrong with my link that I had. So they had asked to see it, though, the next time I come.
Okay. I'll have Ben send you a link that's through Moodle, just in case
okay.
happens.
Yeah, because that was the only thing that happened, is I wasn't able to get it. So.
Now, I'm glad to hear the audio worked well. We'll try and integrate that into the upcoming training, too.
Yeah, it did. And then the other thing is it gave them less of a visual and more of hearing it. So hearing people, hearing it and kind of sitting there and absorbing it more and hearing what she said. So they were able to kind of apply it more.
Yeah, I like the multiple learning strategies. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
So your audience, did you have elders in your audience? Was there any particular reason that they were really receptive to what she was saying?
Yes, I did. There was at least 2 elders there. Yes, there was. And so they liked that because then they were able to take it back, and they invited me to I'm trying to remember what it was called, but they invited me to a meeting to come to their specific tribes. Oh, like an elder. I think it's just like an elder meeting that they host.
Yeah, we've got some very social elders out there. They like to have their meetings and be involved in everything. I'm glad that they're receptive to this, because I think they can really set the tone in the community as to how involved people will get prior to an event.
Right. You know what? I'm sorry. I have to call you from a different number. Can I hold this for like a minute and then get to a different phone and call back in?
Sure, no problem. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry I have to interrupt that. It's only going to take me like 2 minutes, so.
No problem.
Okay. I'll call right back.
Okay, so for the upcoming training, we've got to make sure we have the audio and the video on the laptop embedded as opposed to.
Our audio's still on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure we don't say anything crazy.
Watch your breathing too.
So we'll put that. Yeah. I lost track of what was happening with the 12 me video. So we can talk about that one after, just so I know where it is and how to use it. I think it's on the Moodle.
That's what I was thinking, that it was safe on Moodle.
I remember you were working with I think on some way to convert it. Because we had it on that disk.
Oh, that's right. He got me that program.
Yeah, and once he got the program, I lost track of what happens to it.
So Carolyn, we had 3 more people sign up yesterday. We're going to have quite a large room. I think we're up to 30 now.
Nice.
And then, Will, if you weren't familiar with it, I think, Carol, you probably heard it on the West Coast, that the area we're going to at Oroville is where the Oroville Dam started to rupture. I think it was last year.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So they have faced evacuation, but it didn't actually spill over the banks. And the state's been working on dropping giant boulders in the big hole in the side of the dam.
Okay.
My expectation is that will be their primary concern in terms of an event.
It will be mine as well.
Yeah, welcome to California.
Bring your floaties.
Indeed. Yeah, I think I'll need directions there too.
You're flying into Sacramento, right?
I'm flying into San Francisco and then flying out of Sacramento.
Okay. So do you want to take a rental car all the way up, or do you want to just meet us and drive up in one car?
Well, I've booked a rental primarily because I'll probably be exiting before you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. I'll have Jennifer run the directions for you.
Okay. That'd be
There's
great.
not much when you get up to Oroville. There's pretty much the hotel casino facility. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. We did look up what they had, so we know what sort of restaurants and things we're going to tackle when we get up there.
Hello, I'm back.
So I was just telling these guys that our next training site will be up for Moortown, and there's like 30 people that are signed up, and they had the issues there with the Oroville Dam, so we already know what their focus event will be.
Oh, wow.
And in saying that, I didn't realize that I was telling Will, yeah, by the way, we're going to go up to where the dam has been breached. Tell him to bring his floaties, just in case.
Yeah, that's in the tourist brochure. Thank you, Kelly.
Everybody gets a life jacket. Okay, Rachel, go ahead. So we were talking about the audio, and I was asking if you'd use the video. Ben will send you a link to the Moodle course which has the video embedded in it, but we'll see if we can get it to you in multiple fashions.
Okay. Thank you. The other thing that I think is a good thing maybe is I kind of almost want to do like a pre-assessment next time. And I'm not sure how that would look exactly, but something super short and super simple, but it would give me a little more background as to who I'm talking to. If
Did
I'm
you
able
do a
to
registration form kind of process?
Tanis did that for us, for me, I should say. But it wasn't very specific to what I needed. They had like a registration that they do, and I was able to kind of get the list, but I didn't get it like soon enough in advance to be able to probably do anything with it.
So beyond demographics, which a reg form will pull up, what their job title is, what other kind of information would help in advance?
Well, for me, I think it would be like a basic question of like, what is, I don't know, just something about like, what is crisis response to you? And maybe I could even incorporate it in the class itself, where I can kind of start out with that. Because I did start out with that in my presentation, but what I didn't do is ask them to kind of fill in the blank first. And maybe that's what I should have done, because then I could have maybe made an on-site assessment as to where everybody was and where their background was coming from. The next group that I'm presenting to is a little more an advanced group, so I don't think I'll have the same kind of issues as I did with this group. So it might not be as, I don't know, it might not be as needed, but I still think I want to kind of make some kind of assessment like that.
Okay, so one of the informal ways that we've done that in the past is in the icebreaker, we'd ask everybody to introduce themselves and tell us where they're from, and then add in the additional layer of how long have you been working in crisis response, or, are you familiar with crisis response, or are you new to crisis response? Sometimes that can break it down just a little bit more for you.
Yeah, that's
But
probably an easier way.
if you have questions for a pre-assessment, and I'm kind of writing a few down here, we can try and formalize that as a tool that can go with the manual for anybody who's doing the training.
I think that would be helpful, just because I envision it being a lot of different groups, and then some of them tend to invite others that you might not have known about, so it'd be just nice to be able to address everybody, because I don't want anybody to feel like it's too basic or too advanced for them.
That's funny, because I feel like when I'm delivering this that we need to just tell them this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is so you know how to start reaching all of the advanced pathways towards crisis response.
Yeah. This next group that I'm going to be presenting for is a Southern California Emergency Managers Group.
Okay.
So
and
I would assume that they're
tribal?
very advanced. I'm sorry?
Are they general population or are they
No,
tribal population?
it's tribal. So it's the tribal fire chief, or like fire personnel, and tribal like law enforcement. That's all that I know of so far. I know that there's others. They said it's a disaster preparedness manager is some of these people, but it's tribal.
Okay. So that opens up a number of doors. So there's the resource preparedness where, you have enough resources for everybody to survive for a short period of time, but there's also this sort of administrative preparedness where all of those points of contact know one another and they know their counterparts from the state and know who to contact should they not be able to access tribal lands during a disaster event, and also knowing what all the protocols are for who's in charge. So I don't know if you remember that one of the biggest issues that happened down in Southern Cal was they put together all their crisis response teams, but they lived off of tribal lands. So when the fires occurred there and they were going towards tribal lands, they met up at the line where they were turning everybody away, and they weren't on the list that the fire chief was in possession of. But of course, the folks that were at that point where they had to turn around were CHP. So even if CHP wanted to, they couldn't let these folks in because they had to comply with what the fire chief's list said. So the only way to get them in there was to get the fire chief to okay it, and of course they were just a little busy dealing with the fires.
Yeah.
So trying to hammer out some of those protocols in advance will be an important aspect. And it's interesting because this is not really a training element because every county or state agency may do it in a different way, but encouraging them to figure out who they need to know and whose list is going to be in control if something happens outside of tribal lands is going to be important.
Yeah. Yeah, this group seems very interested in it, and they said there could be anywhere from 20 to 50 attendees.
Wow.
So they blocked out 5 hours for this.
Nice. So anything we can do to help prep you for that? If you want materials, we can manage a registration process. If you don't already have that squared away, we can work on the assessment survey, pre-assessment survey.
Yeah, the assessment survey would be helpful.
Okay. And when are you going to do this training?
Next week. I don't know. I know it doesn't give you guys a lot of time.
Well, we can put it on our to-do list for tomorrow. We use SurveyMonkey, and that can generate a link that you can distribute to everybody in advance.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay.
Then the question will be for us to get the data to you so that you have it. I think we can actually do like a live release where, like, if you clicked on the link, it shows you the responses. So I'll see what we can manage between now and close business tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, this next one's scheduled for January 29th at 12 o'clock.
Okay, got it. So any particular questions that you can think of that you want to tell us right now? Otherwise, we'll do a draft and let you review it and then update it with your edits.
No, I can't think of any right now. Maybe once I see like yours, it might generate some more.
Okay. We'll work on that and get you a link so you can check it out. And it's pretty easy to update. So I would imagine that if we do a draft tomorrow and can get it to you, if you have time to look at it over the weekend, we can finalize it by Monday or Tuesday morning.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Anything else you want to tell us about the training?
I think overall I was kind of just impressed that it's not that it didn't, although there were some people that tended to know more, tended to know less about it, it wasn't like a total shock as I thought it might be, or it didn't seem like a scary topic either. And I think probably because we focused a little more on like fires and natural disasters first before I went into then the realization of like if something happens and criminally that happens, this can be applied to that as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition, huh? We were a little worried because there was so much in the way of environmental disasters outweighing the criminal matters. But it has a good transition in terms of process. Yeah,
it does. It does. And the only other feedback that I would add is that I think it took me a little more time to prepare for it than I anticipated. Like I kind of blocked a certain amount of time thinking, okay, I've been through all these trainings. I kind of know what I would need, but it did take a little bit longer to prepare. So to just kind of etch out more time to prepare ahead of time would be just a suggestion to others.
Good advice.
Because like I said, I was looking at more of the content and like doing that kind of stuff, less about like, you know, sign-in sheets and registration and advertising and that kind of stuff. And I should have spent a little more time on that.
Yeah, to me that's always just kind of part of the process, and I've got help with folks who can handle that part. But I think for your first one, having a good group that you could work with, you know, and get a lot of feedback from is really helpful. It's definitely helpful for us.
Yeah, and nobody was shy.
Our next training is going to have more people than we've had at all of the 3 pilots so far together combined. So I'm curious to see what happens. And they're all going to be probably fairly well schooled in crisis response. But what had happened with the Oroville Dam led them all to evacuation as opposed to actual, you know, crisis response activities. So we'll see what happens. We should have some additional feedback to incorporate here pretty soon, too.
Yeah, because I was going to say, is there anything different that you guys are doing since you're doing it to a group that seems to be well-versed in it? Because that's what I'm facing, so I'm just
find
curious.
out. I don't think we're going to change our strategy going in, but I think our own experience having dealt with the fires up here in Sonoma Lake and Mendocino has created sort of a different understanding at an individual level for me. You know, there's things that we didn't think about in terms of urban populations where tribal communities are at, and I think that can be embedded into the discussion. We haven't embedded it into the curriculum just yet because we haven't had a chance to test it out. So there may be a slight alteration to the curriculum moving forward. We've added just a few little pieces from the pilots, and then we'll incorporate some of the things that you've got here, particularly the pre-assessment surveys, I think is a great idea, and then maybe in the training notes adding in a bit more about getting that information in the classroom. You know, like if the pre-assessment survey is done, you may still want to do a few exercises to elicit more information.
Okay.
We'll get this incorporated, but I don't think you'll see it incorporated until after we do this training that we'll do. It'll be done February 2nd.
Okay.
So probably mid-February we'll have some updates.
Because the only other suggestion that I thought would be helpful for me, it wasn't so bad because I've been part of this group, so I'm a familiar face, but I think for other trainers, specifically other trainers that might not be tribal, it would be helpful to kind of co-partner with somebody to deliver the information. Just someone that could speak a little more to tribal, like, and just a little more to be like, I know I'm in this, and here's kind of what I'm doing. So that's where I think the interview for me was really helpful, because I didn't have that, you know, in me, and I didn't have a live partner, but a live partner might be helpful as well, someone who's a little more local. So it was just an idea that I had thinking moving forward, even giving them like a module that they could do.
I think that's a great idea, and that's kind of what we're doing with this request by having some of the trainees also become trainers, is that it builds out that network. So we've had people who say they're very interested in the material, but they don't want to be in front of a classroom. So I think maybe as we go through this next year that we start identifying people who might be able to do one or two of the modules, not the entire thing, so they don't feel fearful of getting up in front of the classroom, or maybe even do a few more of these audio pieces.
Yeah.
I would think what we find is a lot of the folks who are at the tribal community setting, they don't want to be in front of a classroom. If you sit them down at the table, they'll be talking quite a bit, but they don't want to have to deal with standing up and making a presentation. So we can figure out some more delivery strategies that'll make them feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you giving us all the feedback. It helps a lot.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, it was an interesting course. I really liked it. So it was something that just, you know, got everybody talking about it and kind of got it out there, which is what the goal is, I think, you know, regardless of how it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the time, and in California right now, this is the time to be talking about it. So getting it out there, making sure people get in touch with whatever resources and topics appeal to them, and then know where to point people in that direction.
Yeah.
Until you go through one of these disasters, you don't realize how much detail you really have to know.
Right.
So one of the last things here is the documentation of your time. If you can help us out by giving us some hours, if you need the timesheet, we can make sure that you have that if you don't have it already. It'll help us to also do what you suggested, which is tell people this is how much time you want to set aside to prepare and then deliver. That would be great.
Okay. I will, I've been having my secretary help me keep track of everything, so I will get those from her and send them up to you guys.
Great. Tell her thank you from us. All right. So the timesheet, if you're looking at the computer, this is an example of it, but you don't have to use this. It's just essentially if you can tell us how much time it took for you to prepare and then deliver, that helps out a lot. And you said you'll send us the sign-in sheets. That'll be great, too. We can hit up some of those folks as potential trainers or partial trainers, see if they're willing. And then we have 2 more sessions coming up. So with Oroville and Santa Rosa, those are both further north in your region, but it may also set up a network of folks that we can tap into to help out with the delivery of the trainings. And if you haven't worked with that Intertribal Long-Term Recovery Foundation, they have some folks that would be really good too. There's a lady named Teresa Greger who's the executive director, and she works out of college campus. I'm not sure if it's the Palma College. I'll have to find out, but she's our point of contact right now. And they have a team of folks. So they have a tribal red book that it's called the Red Guide to Recovery, Disaster Recovery, and they put that out through the National Tribal Emergency Management Council. And if you haven't seen that one, Adam Geisler, who's from La Jolla, has got tribal contributions to it. So it's nicely tailored, and it's something that, you know, if people are interested in setting up the teams, that this is a really good handbook. But like I said, we just got it, so hopefully we can get them to donate some for the next group.
Okay. Yeah, and that might be something that, especially this next group I'm going to be presenting to, they might already be very familiar with that. And there might be somebody coming from there. I won't know until I get the sign-in sheet or the RSVP information.
Yeah, if they're there, definitely tap into them and ask them to share their information. They don't get a chance to do that unless they're actually doing training just right after a disaster, because that's what their funding provides.
Yeah, okay.
If you got them in the room, definitely put them to work, because they'll want to share that info.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, I appreciate you giving us all this time. I think it's going to help out when we do the next update, and we'll keep you posted on how things turn out with our training. Although I think you'll be done with yours before we're done with ours. So we might have some things to share about large rooms of people with probably a little bit more emergency response time in their books.
Yeah. Okay, that would be great then. The next time it would just be great to kind of share all the information with each other. So.
Pair notes. All right, well, you have a great weekend, and we'll keep you posted on what comes out of our Moortown training.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.